Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. We're kind of on a roll right now with lightsaber combat, so I thought it'd be a good time to finally break down the famous arrest scene at Palpatine's office. You know, the one where he basically schools 3 full-grown Jedi Masters and makes them look like younglings while schooling them in the art of lightsaber combat. How does Palpatine make this look so easy? Well, it's a combination of things. Let's take a look. So the first individual that Palpatine strikes down is Agen Kolar, a Zabrak Jedi Master. He was actually considered one of the best swordsmen in the Jedi Order. He is one of the 30 survivors out of the 212 that went to Geonosis in the opening battle of the Clone Wars. To survive that battle took skill. There was blaster fire coming from every direction within a very closed-in space. The Jedi were clearly outnumbered, and many without sufficient blaster deflection skills were gunned down. Agen Kolar's own Padawan had died in the fighting. Now, the Zabrak would continue on to become a war hero, commanding clones at the Battle of Brental IV. He would also be sent to chase down the fugitive Jedi Quinlan Vos on Nar Shaddaa. Agen Kolar was selected for the mission because he was one of the most loyal members of the Jedi Order, and he truly believed in what the High Council wanted to do. So it wasn't surprising that 16 months after the Battle of Geonosis, the Zabrak would ascend to the High Council. He would become a close ally to the like-minded Mace Windu. Agen Kolar was all about defending the Jedi Order and failed to see that it was falling apart. When it came to lightsaber combat, the Zabrak usually preferred using Form 4 Ataru. He was said to be as good as Ki Adi Mundi. Kolar also adapted some Form 5 power strikes to supplement the more acrobatic and energy-intensive Form 4. Agen Kolar was held in such a high regard that the Jedi Council believed that he and Mace Windu alone could have arrested Palpatine. Palpatine probably also realized this and singled out Kolar as one of the major threats after Mace Windu. When he leaps up from his desk, he targets Kolar first and takes him out with a very quick thrust right to the chest. It's a very anticlimactic ending for supposedly a very skilled Jedi swordsman, right? One of the most skilled swordsmen in the entire order. Now, a few things could be happening here. First, Palpatine was a master without equal in Form 7 lightsaber combat known as Juyo. Juyo is unofficially a Sith form because it channels dark side energy from emotions to the user's body and provides the individual with furious speed and strength. Witnesses of a true Form 7 practitioner have described their movements as malignant grace. But very few Jedi during this period would have known anything about Form 7 lightsaber combat. It's very unlikely that anyone's even seen it, well, at least the Juyo form of it. Not only was Form 7 extremely dangerous, there was a good chance it might lead the user to the dark side. It was an exceptionally hard lightsaber form for all Jedi to learn, and usually forbidden by the Council. And while it was possible to replicate the movements of Form 7 Juyo, you really couldn't fully see how the form worked unless you were fully immersed in all of that dark side energy and you had all that passion energy flowing through you. So this wasn't exactly something you could practice. This means it's very likely that every Jedi, aside from Mace Windu, who practices a modified version of Form 7, would have never encountered a Force user using this form. Actually, most Jedi, even by the end of the Clone Wars, would have never faced the Sith warrior in actual combat, so this would have been completely new for him. But Agen Kolar, in my opinion, seems like a highly disciplined individual who should be prepared for a lunging, twisting aerial attack. Something else might be going on here. You see, in Form 7 Juyo, there is a special move that some of these practitioners would use, and it's called the Assured Strike. And it's basically an attack that is guaranteed to hit, but it does sacrifice some strength behind the kind of lunge. Utilizing a huge amount of force, the precision of such blows was said to be unblockable. That's most likely what we're witnessing here. It's also completely possible that Palpatine has messed with the Agen Kolar's both physically or mentally through the Force, either by freezing him or distracting him momentarily so that he can outflank his defenses. Also, if you play back the scene frame by frame, you'll notice that Palpatine jumps right in between Agen Kolar and Mace Windu, but he suddenly appears in between Agen Kolar and Saesee Tiin. When Palpatine runs through Kolar, the Zabrak is still looking at where Palpatine was just a second ago. So there is the possibility that Palpatine is so damn quick that he made everyone else look like complete fools. It's very possible that Palpatine is just at a different level in the Force from most of these other Jedi. Next to Agen Kolar watching in horror was Saesee Tiin, an Iktachi Jedi Master. Known as both a skilled starfighter pilot and lightsaber combatant, Tiin was also a natural telepath. This actually would create a lot of interpersonal relationship issues for Itachi, which led him to be an outcast within the Jedi Order. Despite all this, Tin has been seated in the High Council since the Stark Hyperspace War, and he proved to be a very competent combatant during the Clone Wars, especially when seated in the cockpit of his beloved starfighter, Sharp Spiral. When it came to lightsaber form, Saci Tin preferred Form 5, which was really supplemented by his larger physical size and strength. At the same time, his telepathic ability helped him really understand what was going on in the heads of his opponents. Tin should have been able to read Palpatine's mind and at least deduce who he was going to attack first, but even he was stunned by how fast the Sith moved. The second Agen Kolar goes down, Tin attempts to overhand slash Palpatine, but the Itachi is too slow. Palpatine already has turned his blade through the Jedi Master's midsection, killing him. And just like that, it's 2-on-1. It's really important that Palpatine does this in the beginning of the battle, because Form 7 does have one major weakness. It's not great at defending, especially against multiple opponents that are well coordinated. Next up, we have Kit Fisto, the Nautolan Jedi Master. A member of an aquatic species, Kit Fisto was an underwater combat specialist. He would lead Republic scuba troopers during the Battle of Mon Calamari and also be stationed on the water world of Kamino. But that didn't mean he couldn't handle himself well outside of water as well. While on a mission within General Grievous's lair, Kit Fisto showed off his combat abilities and was able to gain the upper hand against the cyborg. Quite impressive considering the fact that Grievous would go on to kill more than 30 Jedi with his 4 arms wielding 4 lightsabers. The cyborg had drilled every lightsaber form into his head. It was quite formidable. Kit Fisto was considered one of the best swordsmen in the entire Jedi Order, but surprisingly, he was a practitioner of Form 1 lightsaber combat. Form 1, or Shicho, was actually developed by the ancient Jedi before the first schism created the Sith Exiles. Which means that Form 1 is kind of an experimental lightsaber form that wasn't actually designed for duels or the battlefield. That doesn't mean Form 1 is completely useless, however, it just means it's a more simple form that has basic attacks and parries. Also, usually every Jedi and Sith learns Form 1 first as a foundation for more complicated methods. Form 1's ultimate goal, however, was to disarm the enemy and not to kill them, as was the Jedi way. And as good as Kit Fisto was in Form 1 lightsaber combat, it was just too simple of a form to go up against Palpatine's Form 7. Kit Fisto manages to recover from the initial shock of seeing 2 of his fellow masters go down, but he seems unsure and timid and allows Mace Windu to engage Palpatine instead. Palpatine cuts Kit Fisto's gut open almost as if it were an afterthought. It's very likely that Palpatine strategized who he would kill first. Agen Kolar and Master Tin are obviously a lot more dangerous than Kit Fisto, who's an aquatic Jedi using Form 1. And so Palpatine basically had complete control over the battlefield and managed to quickly even the odds so that he could face Mace Windu, the true threat, mano a mano. It's funny how all the Jedi Masters who have fallen by this point were considered the top combatants in the Jedi Order, and also decision-making members of the High Council. It shows us just how unprepared the Jedi Order was to combat the Sith. Now, these Jedi Masters must have been very good against the battle droids during the Clone Wars, but against a true Sith warrior, they basically don't stand a chance. Now, perhaps if they had more experience fighting against such enemies, things would have turned out differently, but the Jedi Masters were unprepared both physically and mentally. Mace Windu, however, was no joke. He was by far one of the strongest swordsmen in the Jedi Order. Perhaps only Yoda was his equal, but the little green guy was 900 years old or something, so he had more time to figure it all out. Mace Windu, as we mentioned before, uses Form 7 just like Palpatine, but he actually invented his own version of Form 7 known as Vapad. Vapad was a bit less aggressive and more balanced than Juyo. Juyo was purely offensive rage and destruction. Vapad, however, still had the user channeling the dark side through their body. It was said that Mace Windu was able to fight off the temptations of the dark side while using this form because he was constantly aware of that temptation. The discipline of Mace Windu was a superpower in its own. Very few individuals could actually control themselves like Mace and pull off the rare Jedi Form 7 style. So why would Mace Windu spend all of this time developing a very dangerous lightsaber form that most Jedi can't even use? Well, it's really good against the Sith. Because Vapad not only drew from the internal darkness of the user, it drew from the darkness of the opponent as well. In this case, the opponent was Palpatine, and he was using Juyo, which is infused with a massive amount of dark side energy. Every attack that Mace Windu absorbed from Palpatine made it more powerful, and when Palpatine struck with the Sith lightning, Mace Windu was just able to continue absorbing the energy and then reflect it back against Palpatine. You see, Mace Windu was actually the only individual who was capable of defeating Palpatine because he used the pod. Even Yoda, who most likely is more powerful than Mace Windu in the Force, was unable to get the upper hand against Palpatine. So basically, it's not always about who's more powerful in the Force or who spent more time, training with a lightsaber. Sometimes it's all about using the right form against the right opponent. And that's kind of what we talked a lot about in our last video, actually, about lightsaber combat techniques. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.